Good afternoon. I'm Pete Katowski, it's K-O-T-O-W-S-K-I, from the National Transportation Safety Board, and I'm the investigator in charge of this investigation. The National Transportation Safety Board is an independent federal agency charged by Congress with investigating every civil aviation accident in the United States and significant accidents in other modes of transportation, including railroad, highway, marine, and pipeline. The NTSB determines the probable cause of accidents and issues safety recommendations aimed at preventing future accidents and coordinates the resources of the federal government and other organizations to assist in victims and their family members impacted by major transportation disasters. Before I go any further, on behalf of the NTSB, I would like to extend our condolences to the family of the person involved in this crash and to all the families have suffered injuries in this particular crash. I also would like to recognize the combined efforts of the multiple local, state, and federal agencies working together on this crash. We greatly appreciate their efforts and look forward to working in close collaboration with law enforcement and federal agencies and the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration to determine exactly what happened. The NTSB GO team, consisting of a multidisciplinary group of investigators, arrived last night. We began our investigation today. So as we speak now, they're continuing to gather factual information at this time, and our work will continue on scene for about the next 7 to 10 days. Our mission is to understand not only what happened, but why it happened, and to make safety recommendations to prevent it from happening again in the future. We will not be determining the probable cause of the accident while we are here on scene, nor do we speculate about cause prior to the completion of the investigation. At this early stage, I do not have a great deal of information to provide. I do have some preliminary information that I'll give in a few moments. But I'd like to talk about the NTSB team, our investigative process, and the activities that are ongoing at this particular time. The investigative groups will be led by NTSB experts, both in highway, vehicle, human performance issues. The on-scene staff on this crash will be working in the following areas: highway factors, human performance, motor carrier operations, survival factors, vehicle factors, and recorders group. Our investigation process is basically a 9-point matrix that examines the 3 components of a crash. Those components are the environment, the persons involved, and the vehicle, as well as their influence in the pre-crash conditions, the crash itself, and the post-crash conditions. Our investigations are conducted concurrently and in cooperation with the investigative agencies. After we complete our on-scene phase, we will continue to conduct a detailed examination of evidence recovered and research issues developed and the finalization of our reports. A public docket of factual information of the investigation will be developed and made available to the public. Our investigations take about 12 to 14 months to complete. At the present time, our highway group has initiated the on-scene documentation and photographs of the crash site itself. We will continue with our in-depth examination of the roadway, including the highway geometry, the guardrail, the influence of the guardrails, the highway elevation, and the vehicle trajectory. Our human performance group will examine the driver's qualifications, experience, health, and fitness for duty. We have interviewed and are continuing to interview a number of passengers involved in this crash. Our motor carrier operations group will be examining the carrier, who has at this point been very cooperative with us, and they are identified as first-class tours of Houston, Texas. Our investigators will be on scene at their facility in Houston, Texas, beginning tomorrow to conduct their investigation. The company has been involved in 4 crashes over the past 24-month period. They have received a satisfactory safety rating from the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration of satisfactory in 2015. Our survival factors group has conducted an initial examination of the motor coach itself. A more depth examination to be continued. Our vehicle group has initiated the documentation of the vehicle involved, and the vehicle is now secured inside and will remain as such until we've completed our investigation. The vehicle operation itself will be examined, as well as vehicle recalls that may be applicable to this particular type of motor coach. Our recorders group will be en route soon to assist us on scene, and they'll be here looking at the recording devices that are on the motor coach itself. Motor coaches, as most cars are not equipped with a black box that tells you everything that happened at every moment, like in other forms of transportation. Typically, we need to do downloads, examine vehicle components, control modules that include engine operations, transmission operations, and ABS operations. There are some other equipment, such as GPS devices and drive cams that show actual video recordings. We are uncertain at this stage of the game what devices are on this bus, but are taking a hard look at that and may have information on that soon. What we do know about the crash itself right now is that the motor coach began its return to Houston, Texas from Orlando, Florida, Disney World. They were scheduled to leave that area at about 10 p.m. And approximately 7.5 hours later is when the crash occurred. This driver was en route as scheduled to meet a relief driver in the Mobile, Alabama area. And this is done where there's an exchange of drivers because of hours of service limitations that are put on motor coach and commercial vehicle drivers. As part of our investigation, our motor carrier group will continue to look at that operation and the movement of this motor coach at this crash. That concludes the information I have at this time. I'm prepared to take a few questions, but I will say again that we have very little information or detailed information to provide at this time because of the fact that we're basically in our infancy in this investigation. And as I said earlier, our folks are in the field right now gathering evidence. So at this time, I'll take any questions or if you may have. Yes, sir.
As a layman, it seems kind of remarkable that only one person died in this crash. Can you comment on the rate of mortality and rate of injury that we saw in this?
What we look at in part of our investigators group is crashworthiness features. The NTSB has been on record for several years concerning occupant protection. Occupant protection is oftentimes interpreted to be seat belts. This motor coach was new, was on its second run. It was equipped with 3-point position seat belts, like you have in most passenger cars. Part of our examination will be survivability factors. So we will look at the passenger restraint system, not only the belts themselves, but the seats, the structure of the motor coach, how it withstood the impact and subsequent movements after the initial impact. I think that, as you pointed out, although any loss of life or any injury is tragic enough in itself, but crashworthiness improvements over the years may have contributed to help those involved in this crash.
You said an initial investigation has been done on the bus. What were you guys looking at today specifically on the bus?
And the information we were gathering from the bus today included the vehicle identification number of the bus, the components that are on the bus. And as I said earlier, when we look at our recorders group, we'll be looking at engine operations, transmission operations, those types of systems. So we're looking for that, trying to gather to see if they have any information. They'll also be looking at the mechanical condition of the bus. Even though it's a new bus, those things are still important to us.
How new of a bus was it? Do you know the year and things like that? Can you tell us?
I don't know what the exact year is. I know at this moment that this was the motor coach's second trip.
So do you feel pretty confident you'll find those devices you're looking for that maybe give you a history of what was going on prior to computers, things like that?
Our goal and objective is to see if they're equipped with it, because they're not required to have them. Oftentimes we're limited to information that we can gather. Sometimes there are devices that are on vehicles, but they provide no real data.
What's the bus driver restrained following the crash?
That is information that our survival factors folks are looking at this time.
Will you be looking at whether or not, I know in this situation, guardrails at the ravine itself may not have prevented the crash? That's something you guys, I'm sure, are looking at. But are you looking at whether or not that would be something you would recommend to ALDOT in the future? Possibly barricades with the guardrails actually right there for the ravine to keep vehicles from traveling into it?
In our highway group, our examination takes a look at a number of things. And one of those, as I said earlier, are guardrails, their placement, and the types of guardrails. Guardrails is a very complex topic. And again, it's a part of a system and an interacting system. So our investigators, our highway engineer will be looking at, along with Alabama DOT, to look at the types of barriers that are out there, and if there are improvements that can be made, that's part of the investigation.
Mr. Kosowski, did you say that the bus was equipped with seat belts, that the passengers had seat belts?
Yes, ma'am, that's correct. They're 3-point position belts, like you find in a car. So that's a seat belt and shoulder harness.
Can you tell us any updates with the medical examiner? I know they're looking at the bus driver today. Do you expect something soon that will help you with your investigation?
We have our folks, our survival factors folks, again, are dealing with the medical examiner's office, and will be working closely with them. That information is not available to us at this particular time.
Is there one factor that you're possibly looking into more than another at this point? I mean, are you following any sort of specific lead, or is it all open?
It's all open. As I said, we look at the things that we look at now, as I've indicated, our investigative groups. We're looking at all of them. And as part of our investigations is a safety investigation, versus typically what you have in a law enforcement investigation is who's the primary cause of the crash and what caused it. Ours is why did the crash occur, more so than who caused the crash. And part of that is that we remain open about all of it, because oftentimes we find, and it's been true in other modes of transportation, that it isn't just one single event or one single circumstance. Oftentimes it's a number of events or circumstances that all collectively come together, and the result is a crash.
Do you have any preliminary information as far as how long Mr. Caledon, the driver, had been driving? You mentioned the relief driver in the Mobile area. Do you have any information on that as far as how long that stretch was, or what the scheduled amount of time he was allowed to drive was?
The routing that we've looked at so far, and the basic information that we have, is that the driver placement would have been adequate to maintain hours of service, as scheduled. We haven't verified that yet. That's part of what our investigation will look into. We know what the scheduled departures are, but there's a number of things that we have not specifically confirmed yet.
Can you repeat that departure time for me one more time?
The departure time was scheduled to be at 10 p.m.
Leaving from Orlando?
from Orlando.
When it comes to previous crash history for this company, for those crashes, were there any similarities to those 4 crashes that might be looking to this crash specifically that might be a tie-in when it comes to malfunctions for this bus?
At this time, I don't know what those other crashes involved. I know there was one fatality crash, and there were 3 damage reportable crashes.
Do you know if the bus tried braking at all before going down to the ravine?
At this time, no. Hopefully, with the downloads and recorders, and as we move forward, we may have answers to that.
And it appeared that you had some investigators back at the scene today. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Can you kind of discuss what they were doing as far as like taking measurements and all that?
The measurements the things that we're taking is the physical evidence that was documented, both in photographs by the Baldwin County Sheriff's Office, and information that was documented, measured, and identified by the Alabama State Troopers. We're working with them on scene. We're also working with the Alabama Department of Transportation. And so our work is to piece all of those together. And again, as we go back well beyond of where the events start to occur in an effort to try to understand what things were like on the approach.
Have you found any witnesses yet who were awake at the time and were able to tell you anything about conditions immediately before the bus hit the ravine? Can you share any of that?
I can share with you that we have interviewed a number of folks that were on the bus. We have interviewed other folks that were on the trailing bus. The results of those interviews, I'm not at liberty or do not have the background to release at this time.
This may be a little specific, but several hundred yards east of the crash site, there were some clear ruts where a vehicle had crossed from one side of the interstate to the other, but it wasn't clear whether those had been left by the bus. Are you familiar with those, and can you say whether those are from this incident?
The indications that we have is that the motor coach was traveling westbound, that it went across the median, it departed the roadway at a shallow angle into the median, crossed into the eastbound lanes, crossed the eastbound lanes, impacted a guardrail on the eastbound side, and then came back across the eastbound lanes back into the depressed median itself, and then down the embankment.
Will NTSB be sharing or making available any video or pictures of the bus being inspected now that you guys have it?
We don't have anything scheduled for that as of yet. There may be photos released in a later time.
Can you go over briefly maybe the times that are allowed by law for a driver like this to be on the road before he has to take a break, that type of thing? Is there a
Motor coach operations, passenger carrier vehicles, it's a 10-hour driving rule. They can drive for 10 hours and be on duty for a period of 14 hours. It's different than commercial drivers of other commercial vehicles, non-passenger.
How many students have you spoken with so far, and can you say where those most seriously injured were seated?
I don't know how many we have injured. We pretty much have completed our seating chart and know just about the placement of all the occupants of the motor coach.
Mr. Patowski, so you're saying, am I correct, so the bus that crashed was the lead bus?
Yes, ma'am.
Of the 2 buses?
The information that I have right now, yes, ma'am.
And so the bus that was trailing,
Recommendations can come to federal agencies. They can come to state, local, county, cities, vehicle manufacturers, manufacturers of vehicle components is where our recommendations can lead to. Okay? Okay, thank you very much.